Well, we normally cover a lot of Street Fighter V here for those of you that don't know, but there was some other news that happened. Well, it kind of broke just yesterday. That doesn't have anything to do with Street Fighter V. It's about potentially Dragon Ball Fighters, and more specifically, possibly a Dragon Ball Fighters 2. Now, this is all rumors, as we'll get into and such. There's nothing concrete, but there's something to stand on here. And our very own Dakota DarkHorse Hills was the one that broke this story with some help from Majin Shinhan from translation because it was all in Japanese. But the idea here, I'll just give you the headline of the article. Dragon Ball FighterZ 2 or a different big anime fighting game appears to be in development. That's exciting. Dakota, welcome. Tell us all about it.
Heyo, always good to be here. And yeah, pretty much there was this job listing floating around some social spaces and stuff that I took notice of. And when you look at it, like the title translated pretty much says like new development of a famous large-scale IP fighting game.
Where,
And
where did this come from, by the way?
this is on a website called Freelance Hub, ironically, which is kind of funny. But
No relation to us.
no,
Maybe a distant cousin, but I didn't know about it. We 23 and me and found out about these guys. We didn't know that they existed before that.
yeah. And this subcontracting job posting, when you look at just the title, it might not stand out as much. Well, I mean, it would stand out, but you wouldn't like immediately be able to like hone in on like, okay, so what is this for? What is this going to be? Who is this? Because there aren't like it doesn't say in the description, okay, this is Bandai Namco, this is Arc System Works.
Hmm.
But when you start looking at the details, it kind of narrows it down to a point where like, okay, this can only be one of a few things pretty much. And pretty much the thing that really takes it down to Bandai Namco specifically is that it lists a world famous battle manga that everybody knows about as like the key like selling point of like, okay, this is what we're working on.
Hmm.
And anything that's pretty much a popular battle manga is going through Shonen Jump and or Shueisha, and all of those properties are under the umbrella of Bandai Namco for video game rights.
Mm.
And so, which is why we got like Dragon Ball Fighters for them and everything else, Jump Force, the My Hero Academia, Arena Fighters, all of that. It's all Bandai Namco. They own all of that. There's no like, I'm trying to even think of like what other big battle mangas would even fit under that. And like, you could maybe say like, I wouldn't really say Berserk is a battle manga, but that's not owned by them. And I think Koei Tecmo put out the last Berserk game, but I
Mm.
highly doubt that's what that's talking about.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, sort of like, oh, Sailor Moon or something, since Arc System Works made a Sailor Moon fighting game back in like 93, but I don't know about that either. Um,
And
so,
Dragon Ball Fighters, or Dragon Ball, but specifically Dragon Ball Fighters, is super hot right now. I mean, right now, relatively speaking, I know it's kind of at the end of, well, seemingly at the end of its life and such, and it's not as hot within like its current lifespan. But the IP, the impact that this game has had in the fighting game community, the sales, the reaction to it, it's definitely a moneymaker for them.
yeah, the obvious go to for what this project could be is a sequel to Dragon Ball Fighters for a handful of reasons, like you were mentioning. Because, like, I think Dragon Ball Fighters kind of blew everybody's expectations from, like,
Hmm.
both, like, the development side and, like, the audience side. Because it was a game, that launched in 2018 and sold over 2 million copies in, like, a week.
Yeah.
and became the fastest selling Dragon Ball game of all time, which I think Kakarot then came back and beat it. But like, we got to the point where, okay, so the game is, 3 years old now. It's sold 6 million copies as of the end of last year. We got 3 seasons of DLC, 2 or 3, years of esports support. And now, like, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta released back in March. And now we haven't really heard literally anything about the game since then.
Hmm.
And so the general feeling is that the game's probably kaputs for now, which kind of frees up the ever busy Arc System Works to perhaps do something else with a anime license. And a sequel to Dragon Ball just kind of makes the most sense for money reasons and logistical reasons. And
Well, go ahead.
it was just I mean, you've already got all of these, 40 plus character models. You've got all these systems developed. You've got all of this stuff already put in. But there's, a lot that can be improved upon. You can diversify the way the roster plays, add new systems, and most importantly, add in things like rollback netcode and better online options.
Yeah.
And then you've got yourself a probably bona fide hit right there without, having to start over completely from scratch working on a brand new title.
Well, and as we know, it's way too hard in the producer's words herself to put rollback netcode into Dragon Ball FighterZ, and that went over well. That's one of the big sticking points for the game right now. But like an update into a Dragon Ball FighterZ 2, you could kind of keep that momentum going a little bit, and you could just design it with the now expected rollback netcode from the start. So yeah, I think that would be a much better direction to go as opposed to trying to go back and change Fighters' netcode, Fighters 1, I should say, is netcode, which is something that the community absolutely wants. But I think that they would be down, and you'd check more boxes, kill more birds with this single stone if you just rolled forward into Fighters 2 and had rollback netcode.
Yeah, pretty much. I really don't see them going back and updating it at this point. I mean, the game's, over 3 years old, sold 6 billion copies. I don't know how much more it could possibly do by adding rollback at this point. So I think the most sensible thing is, yeah, just put it in the new game. But that doesn't obviously mean that it's going to be Dragon Ball. And there's, a ton of other properties that Bandai Namco has access to that a lot of people would certainly like to see a traditional fighting game for.
Well, do we even know it's going to be a traditional fighting game? Because there's a ton in the way of like arena fighters. Like Jump Force recently came out, and Dragon Ball, as an IP, has a ton of arena fighter style games. So why wouldn't it just be something like that?
Yeah, that's one of the kind of big questions Nick and I had yesterday looking into this. And from what we found was actually quite interesting because, I mean, over in the West, we kind of classify these arena fighters as something like a, cousin to the traditional fighting game where you're doing a lot of the same things, but the focus is more on looking cool than sort of feeling like a good fighting game. But
Hmm.
from what we found, looking through what Japan classifies these games as, and they don't seem to classify them as fighting games at all, but instead put them under the umbrella of action games.
Mm.
And this job listing specifically says, a half dozen times that it is a fighting game. And so that seems to pretty much cross that off the list, which a lot of people are probably pretty okay with at this point.
Sure.
So if it is ends up not being Dragon Ball related, the kind of most obvious places to go would be, you've got your One Piece, which is the best-selling manga series of all time. You've got Naruto slash Boruto, which is huge all around the world. There is Demon Slayer, which has exploded in popularity over the last 2 years or so, and the movie that came out, over the past year to a few months over in the West here, has become the biggest anime movie of all time and the like best grossing movie to ever come out of Japan, which is kind of nuts.
Hmm.
And then you've got JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, of course, Bleach, which is coming back with its anime soon, and Fist of the North Star is probably further down there, but Arc System Works did make a Fist of the North Star game back in the day. And then as far as other possibilities, you've got My Hero Academia, which would probably be pretty up there for, my list of what I'd like to see and what would be pretty fun and likely. But it doesn't quite have the sales numbers of a One Piece or Naruto. And then Hunter x Hunter is pretty much in the kind of same category. And then there's kind of the hottest anime of the season in Jujutsu Kaisen, but it's also doesn't quite have the sales, and I'd say it's kind of still a bit too new to be investing in something like this at this point. So those are kind of
The other runners, the other candidates.
yeah, those are pretty much all the other front runners, and from there, I'd say like the top three would probably be at the end of the day One Piece, Demon Slayer, and My Hero Academia, just for kind of the more modern relevancy.
I was speaking with Majin Tenshinhan before this, and unfortunately he wasn't able to join us here because he's running a tournament of his own, so hopefully that goes well. But he did leave some notes, and on the matter of whether or not it would be Dragon Ball versus something else, he says, I know Dakota keeps saying that there's a decent chance for something else, but there really isn't. He says, in regards to Dragon Ball FighterZ, it was a game that was based on a huge IP, but it was still a brand new fighting game IP, and then it did what it did, referencing to what you kind of just said about, all of its success, its sales, and how it impacted the community. And he says, in an era where a lot of people are starting to call fighting games niche, compare it to Injustice, also a gigantic IP, and that did quite well for NRS. It was nowhere near the community success DBFZ was. So, in his opinion, there's zero incentive to not follow up on this particular wave that FighterZ is currently on, and that there's still like a well in terms of like characters that people want to see, and then of course the rollback stuff, like to get the FighterZ experience. They're still chewing on it with what it is now, and there's some obvious ways to improve on it. So with all of that in there, it's like he says other series you don't have the same fan base as Dragon Ball, which would make doing or pursuing a different series like this an immediate gamble, at least compared to pursuing Dragon Ball. And he says, why gamble?
Yeah, I know Nick has it as like a 90 to 99% uh, chance for Dragon Ball Fighters 2, but I'm probably leaning more around the kind of 60-40 range.
Mm-hmm.
And I do get that, and I can definitely see, Bandai Namco, you know, not being able to pass up on the prospect of following up on what may be, easy money for them. But at the same time, like, if you look at sort of what Arc System Works has been doing for the last 5 or 6 years, they haven't really been doing a ton of, like, direct sequels in a way. You go back to, like, Persona 4 Arena to Guilty Gear Xrd, and then all, the Xrd expansions from there. But, over the past few years, we've had like Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle, which is its own weird spin-off thing. We're not going to get a Grand Blue 2, I don't think. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and Blaze Blue is probably done for the moment. And we've got Guilty Gear Strive now, and Guilty Gear Strive is following up after Guilty Gear Xrd first released in 2013, 2014, so that's quite a ways between sequels, but it's ultimately up to Bandai Namco and what they want, since it's their money and their properties. So yeah, I'd say Dragon Ball's definitely the most likely thing to come out of this, but I could definitely easily see pretty much any of these other anime manga series getting their spotlight, especially when they haven't had, the same opportunities to get a traditional fighting game outside of, just the arena fighters we've gotten for like My Hero and the like Jump All Stars game, Jump Force, things like that.
Mhm.
And obviously, the dream would probably be to kind of rework the Dragon Ball engine and just throw all of the Shonen Jump All Stars in there as well. But I don't know about that at this point.
How like because we're what like 3 years into Dragon Ball FighterZ life now, something like that, or is it four? I think it was announced in 2017 and released in 2018, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. Okay, so about 3 years into its life, and if this was indeed the follow-up to it, how far off would it be at this point then? And then does where does that line up in terms of sure, Dragon Ball FighterZ is hot right now, but if this is the sequel and they're just kind of beginning in on it, then I mean, would it be like a 6-year lifespan, and would Dragon Ball FighterZ still be doing well at that point? Like, I guess my question is from the point of view of the timelines, does this line up to be an effective sequel to Fighters in that respect?
I think so, in a way. One of the interesting things that is put into this job listing here is that they specifically say that the person that they'll be bringing in will be able to work on this project from the pretty much very beginning, and stating that this game is still in the planning stages and planning to release on the PlayStation 5 at the very least. And since it still says it's in the planning phases, that's that's
Feels like it might be a
probably.
little late for a follow-up to Fighters.
I mean, it could be, but I mean, if they're kind of retooling what they've already had, that should, definitely cut down on the
Mm,
development time needed and planning needed to actually get this off the ground and really going into
yeah.
production. But yeah, at this point, we're probably at the very, very least a year away from seeing whatever this is announced, but probably more like 2 years.
Mhm.
And so at that point, yeah, that'll be 2 or 3 years in between from when Dragon Ball FighterZ would have stopped to whenever this is would get announced, and so that is quite a gap. But at the same
Mhm.
time, that is absence can make the heart grow fonder.
True, true. And the FGC has certainly learned recent lessons in waiting with all of the delays that have happened with games like, well, King of Fighters 5 just recently got delayed, and of course we just got Guilty Gear Strive, but it was supposed to come out last year, and well, Street Fighter 5 into what might be a Street Fighter 6, although that's not officially been announced or anything like that. We do know that it sounds like through leaks and rumors that that got delayed as well, and but that manifested in a whole other season, if that's true, of Street Fighter where maybe that wasn't going to be the case. So do you think do you still think that this is the end for Fighters 1, or is there a chance that we'd get more content to tide us over between now and then?
I do feel like there is a fairly decent chance we could see another like maybe smaller season like we've seen with Tekken
Hmm.
7 season 3 and season 4, where it's like, oh, it's only 3 characters or 2 characters, but maybe like 4 characters to go out on or something. Maybe if they tie it in with like the new movie that's going to be coming out, like I think by like the end of the year or something, and like the Dragon Ball Super manga is still going, and so like if they could like maybe close things out with a bang of like putting in like the villain of the last arc, Moro, or something like that, that could be a kind of hype way to send the game off. But I'd put that maybe below a 50% chance at this point. It just kind of feels like Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta was a good enough, like,
Hmm.
okay, this is a spot where, like, if this is the end, then okay, so be it. That's fine.
Fair.
Like, the
Yeah.
game's in a good spot. It's probably about as balanced and open as fun as it's ever been. The problem is at this point is that, just the online kind of sucks. And
Mhm.
that's the big shame. And so maybe if they could fast track a sequel out in, a year or two, that would be ideal for them on a business side, perhaps. But I don't know logistically if that would be capable of happening, especially with how COVID has seemingly, pushed everything back
Sure.
by. I mean, it feels like at this point everything's been pushed back by like a year,
At least.
and we'll see how things continue to do going forward.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say on it? I think I'm getting pretty close to time here, but if you have any more notes on it.
I think the only thing I had left to say on this was there are other studios that Bandai Namco has obviously worked with for anime titles, most notably CyberConnect 2 and Spike Chunsoft.
Mm.
And they are typically always relegated, however, to making the Arena Fighter games. Like I think Spike Chunsoft did Jump Force, and then CyberConnect does the like Naruto Ultimate Ninja games, and I think they did the My Hero games. So there is a possibility they could be roped in to doing an anime fighting game. And CyberConnect has done fighting games in the past. They did Bizarre Adventure All Star Battle. So there's a chance of that. But like Arc System Works is still, the go to at this point if they can handle the load, because I don't know how many teams they've got at this point to do everything that they're doing. But yeah, it's everything seems to be pointing right at Bandai Namco and by extension Arxis. So that's the best case scenario and also the most likely. So, and I don't see
Well,
them handing off like a fighting game to the Tekken Project team or the Soul Calibur team, though I kind of doubt Soul Calibur is going to get a sequel anytime soon. So who knows?
yeah. Well, I mean, the stars do seem to be aligned from this fairly distant place that we are to it. But I mean, good news in general, something to be somewhat guarded but hopeful for. And you guys can read more on this. We have an article, like I said, Dakota wrote it, Nick translated it, up on the front page right now, and we'll link that into the description of the video here, so you can check that out, get any other details that we may have missed. But thank you very much for coming on and talking to the people about this, Dakota.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me back. I'm always glad to be here.
All right, guys. Thanks for checking us out. And like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you in the next one.